Yeah, you think? Let's see. Ba, 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 ba. Just go in portal login. I swear, it's like I don't do it for a few days and I forget what the hell I'm doing. What was I doing? Channel. Mute. Try and keep it live. Try and keep it live. Okay. Cool. All right. How do I open this window? I don't remember. Do I just? Oh no. Hold on. Get on my channel. There we go. Right, got a couple people showing up already. Hello, hello. Let me go to my email. That's the wrong one. Wait, no, that's right. The way to get to, I don't think you guys can see this. I mean, you're not supposed to, but yeah. The way to get to the course management for you guys is very roundabout. Okay. Now, morning. Class Jesus. All right. Boop. All right, and this should be 8:30 class. 7:30. Close this. Oh. I'll get to the minute. Let a few more people come in. It's so weird that the timing on these are so off. Yeah, because I've got the one that you guys should see. That's more accurate than like the streaming one. It's weird. I don't know. Yeah, because it says here 10 watching, and then concurrent viewers 11, and then the actual stream settings says 9. Like, what's this nonsense? We're at 12. Not quite everybody yet. Although, once again, as usual, if you would, and I assume you guys can all hear me, sound off in the chat section. Thank you. You guys were a step ahead there. Yeah, and that'll be our role for today. I think this is the last week we're going to be doing this online. At least that's what I was told at the beginning of the semester. We'd be doing this for 3 weeks, and then we'd start meeting up at the continuum. So, I mean, obviously, you'll get some kind of official email, I'm sure. But yeah, we'll start doing, you know, proper class role, or I have to do the work. But I appreciate you guys doing this for me. Why is it that is so dumb? Hey, Toru. You gonna get up here? Alright. Michelle, I got you. Hey. Oh, fine. Walk off. I don't care. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, you know, I'm ever so slightly skeptic about all that, but you know, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, the campus isn't, well, it's sort of active. We've got staff that are using the campus to stream from sometimes. I'm just here at home, you know, because I'm a lazy fuck. Because why not? I mean, if I can do it from home, I'm gonna do it from home. And apparently there have been 3 confirmed cases of Francis variant. So that's a thing. So you know, we're gonna have to be careful. It's not fun. I've already had it, but that doesn't mean I'm immune, because apparently you can get it a second time. And you know, fuck you, YouTube. I'm not making any money off this. I don't care. So yeah, we'll deal with that as we come to it. All right. Once again, anybody that comes in, I guess, as we go on, you know, just sound off as you get here. That's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's about everybody. Again, if you're, well, no, I'm seeing 12, but I'm one of the viewers because I'm looking at it from a separate thing. Okay, cool, great, thanks y'all. So yeah, if you've got any questions, let me know. I'm gonna probably send out an email after class today and see if there's any new word on like what we're gonna do next week, so I can have some more concrete answers for you guys on Thursday. But then again, like, the last word is probably gonna be an email or some more official correspondence to you guys rather than me talking to you guys like this. But anyway, I guess we'll get back into the material. I believe this is where we left off. We had, Hesiod, who I don't really remember doing much about in the, wow, that's Roman stuff. I really don't remember talking too much about in the test, so not a huge thing. I mean, y'all don't fight. You're bigger than her, Otto. Anyway, yeah. I mean, Hesiod had a lot to say. He was certainly important, but at the same time, it's like, I'm the one who's making the test, so whatever. And apologies if you can hear my cat making a lot of noise, because he decides this is when he wants to make noise. Yada, yada, yada. Okay. So, also, was it this class or my other class? If you're having trouble accessing the PowerPoint off of Blackboard, or even the syllabus, because it's a Microsoft Word document, you guys should all have access to Office 365 through Francis Marion, which is a free, I mean, that's what I use. It's a free, basically, as long as you're a student of Francis Marion, because you all technically are, you have access to Microsoft Office. And what you do is you go through the Office 365 website and you put in your Francis Marion credentials, your login information. And it should activate it. And if it doesn't, get in touch with the tech people at Francis Marion, and they should be able to help you more, because I only know so much. I've done it myself, and now it's done, and I've not had to mess with it again. And then I immediately forget everything I have to do because I've just not been able to hold on to information. My brain is not been behaving these last year and a half. But yeah, so if you're having issues with that, I'm not expecting you to go out and buy an Office license or something. It's something free you can get through the school, and you should all have access to. So, just FYI, that's the thing. And that is certainly the way to do it. Anyway, so, Tyrants and Reformers, this is back when, the term tyrants came about. Here we are. So tyrants were these autocrats, which simply means people who took power by force. These, leaders that, an autocrat is simply, a leader who takes power by his own means. It's always running. Now, typically these tyrants were seen as a good thing, because they brought change to a polis. They showed up a lot of times because the polis, however you want to say it, were typically controlled by these ruling elite families. And a lot of times it would devolve into two feuding families, and they would be willing to tear the city apart to rule it. And so then this third party would come in and just knock them both down and take over the city, um, and typically also change the the government style of the city itself. Also, they usually wouldn't set up some kind of like dynasty. They would be charismatic individuals, and once they were gone, that was it. Again, wasn't long lasting. They set up from the government, and that was it. They moved on. It wasn't some system of these guys take over, and now we're under the rule of some outside force. So the use of the word tyrant in the more modern sense, like we used it in, as I'm going to be talking about in my other class, like with the English king, it's like, oh, he's a tyrant. It's like, not really, not the old, not the original meaning of the word. So yeah, they would knock out these aristocrats and usually not necessarily move them towards a more democratic rule, because that wasn't a thing. Athens had sort of a democracy. We'll talk about that later. But this did at least shake things up enough that they were able to move forward, I suppose is probably the best way to put it. Yeah. Yeah. And again, since these guys didn't have successors, it wasn't like with a king or nobility where it was all about, the family line. So you could have some brilliant king, and then his son or whatever, someone in his family has to take over, and they're an idiot. We're going to see that a lot with various rulers too, especially in England. But oh well, they've got the royal blood, so they have to take over. It's like, but they're dumbasses. Like, they don't know what they're doing. So excuse me. Now, as we mentioned, the Dark Ages of the Greek, yeah, the Dark Ages of the Greek policies, after the Mycenaean Age, caused this isolation, caused this change in the policies, and they formed their own types of governments. So we did have similarities between them, but nearly every polis, which again, for those of us that maybe weren't paying attention before, polis simply means city-state. So each individual city was its own state. So we're using polis as its own definition. They were all different. So we mentioned the physical makeup of a polis. the agora, the or the Acropolis, the hot built up part, and the agora, which was the marketplace. But now this is a polis overall. What do you want? So you've got the built up physical place, which exists as the agora and the Acropolis. So don't get those mixed up. And then the territory, which was the city itself, which again was typically the built-up place, but also the outlying lands. Otto, shut up. Sorry. Because even though the city itself is typically what you think of when you think of a polis, like, oh, Athens. Well, it's Athens, the city, but also Attica, all this land around Athens, was technically also part of Athens. And also the political community of the polis, because each polis had a very strong, what's the word I'm looking for? Proud, vibrant political community. So, a number of polis, such as Athens, Kos, and Naxos. Kos and Naxos were small island polis. There were some commoner assemblies. Now, again, these were not true democracies. They didn't have votes, but they could get together and voice complaints, and they might get listened to, maybe. Now, here we are. Another Greek term, demos, which means masses or the people. These are the free male native residents of Polis. They were not noble, but they had some amount of standing and wealth. Now, this is where we do get the term democracy, because that means the government of the people, because demos means the people. So, there you go. Now, again, it's still very specific. Free male native residents of a polis, but you have to have some standing and wealth before you're considered, the people. Now, this is also important. Now, this is still technically a Greek term, but one that's made it into our lexicon, the phalanx. This was the basic fighting unit. The spear and shield guys, usually they would form, your wedges and would back one another up. And each individual soldier was known as a hoplite. Yeah. Now, this is important because it's weird sitting down doing this. Because, again, once we get back to the continuum, I tend to walk around and pace and talk with my hands, and my video is not live. There we go. And I can only do so much. I've only got a webcam, so I can't really pace too much. But yes. So I mean, this is something like we would see in, say, Vietnam here in the United States, where, hey, we can send kids that are 18 years old to go fight and die in a war. Why can't they vote? So that was when the voting age got lowered to 18. Um, Same idea happened here. It's like, hey, the nobility aren't the only ones fighting now. It's these hoplite guys. Well, if they're fighting for us in these wars, they should have some kind of political voice. And this also was when the idea of formation warfare really took off and truly dominated the battlefield, rather than just some dudes on horses, fighting each other with those little short swords they had. And here we have a phalanx. Now, this is a Macedonian phalanx. This is more advanced than what they'd be dealing with early on. We'll talk about the Macedonians like next chapter. But you can see, let's use my mouse. Again, I'd be pointing at the screen normally. But you can see here, they've got their shields out, and then they've got their spears well out in front of them. I mean, the guys all the way back here have their shield tips ahead of the guys. What, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys? No, that guy's got his spear up. 4 guys ahead of him. The spear tip's still here. So if you've got cavalry running in, they've got to go through 4 layers of spear before they even get to the front lines. And then you've still got all this behind them. So it really cut into the whole importance of the nobility, which is something that the infantry always did. Then also, the phalanx shield wall, they'd lock their shields together, put the spears through, and again, that was something that your typical cavalry could not deal with. Now, this is very much not at all an accurate representation, because all their shields are different, and you wouldn't have that in an army. But whatever. Alright, so and because everything was very different, because of course things were different. What do you want, cat? Be careful. Really? So, if you've ever seen Greece, you'll know that it has a lot of very different geographical regions. I mean, you've got obviously a lot of ocean, but also lots of mountains, lots of fertile plains. So each polis had its own economy, and even the polises, that were agricultural were still very different from each other, because they were able to grow very different products. Of course, trade over water was going to be the big thing, because you don't have roads in ancient Greece. I mean, I taught a class on like technology in America, and we didn't have roads in America that were any good until like chapter 6. That was after like railroads. I mean, our roads were garbage for a long time. Like, hey, if you want to get something somewhere, either send it by boat or railroad. And obviously, they didn't have railroads back then, so it's going to be boat. They mostly imported food and exported wine, silver, olives, large, clay vessels. And by 500 BC, they were minting silver coins. They marked them on the sides to know where they were from. So whenever we find shipwrecks in the Mediterranean, we can actually typically figure out if it's old enough to be from one of these polis. Where it was from is really quite fascinating. Also traded with Carthage, which we mentioned, was a major trading power there in the Mediterranean. And once everybody started, why is my cat walking around with his tail fluffed out? Jesus Christ. And the other powers in the Mediterranean, once everybody started using coinage, because, the bartering system is flexible. Once everybody's using silver coins, that's going to be something a bit more stable. And unlike money today, it's worth the silver that it's made of, rather than being understood as being worth something. Otto, you need to shut up. Jesus. Okay, so there's some silver coins. They'd heat them up and press them in the die, and it would have, the head of usually a statesman and something else on the back there. All right, on to some culture. So also, in the Archaic Age, and again, this is right after the Dark Ages in Greece, we had, the epic poems of the Iliad and the Odyssey telling of, Odysseus and the Trojan War and all of this. In the Archaic Age, it changed to local poems, poems that were more about your local polis, using first-person narrative, so it's more about your local heroes and their personal journeys, as opposed to some far-off hero that is some basically demigod. Intellectuals would teach orally, so they just walk around and talk, which, I need something to go off of to keep my brain somewhat together, so more power to them. Pardon me. They spent most of their time speculating on humanity's place in the cosmos, and since the polis were relatively stable in terms of uh, the economics and safety, they were able to worry about this sort of thing. It wasn't whether they were going to be able to eat or not be invaded. They were like, well, everything's cool, so let's talk about humanity's place in the grand scheme of reality or whatever. So that's how we're probably in a pretty decent place when we're dealing with philosophy, as opposed to basic survival. So this is a step up, beyond the cave paintings. I'd say. Speaking of art, excuse me, I'm sorry. We have these grand stone temples to the gods, uh, rather than you had these palaces to men before. So this is when you would get like the Parthenon. I believe that's the right word. I always get Parthenon and Pantheon mixed up. Pantheon's the one that actually has all the statues of the gods. So the Parthenon, I believe, was the one for Athena at the top of the Acropolis in Athens. I think. I don't remember it all specifically. my focus is much later in history. Each region had their own distinctive pottery. Sculpture was influenced by the Egyptians. However, by 600 BC, it had evolved slightly. The Egyptian sculpture was very stoic. I mean, it's still around today, so it's very. I actually was having a conversation with some people over the weekend. It's like, yeah, as long as we've been around, you can't really get a much more stable building material than just digging straight into rock. But most Egyptian sculpture is just very straight. Here's the figure. Like, okay, cool. But by 600 BC, we had this archaic style. It's just this little half smile on this particular character that I actually got. I've got a picture of, so I'll show you. Excuse me, I apologize for that. That was, I guess that was for me chugging that orange juice. But rather than it simply being a stoic, flat-faced figure, it was, it had a smile, and it had a lot more life because of that. Yeah, so here she is. This is the statue of Beriscalia. I don't know, y'all. I don't speak Greek. Statue by Hesiod of Paris. Yeah, so you can tell. Do I have a bigger picture of it? No, I don't. It's shown in the book in a more full-scale size. Yeah, it shows that it's very much of the Egyptian style, but also there's this Greek emphasis on individuality. apparently it was a see, she died and her parents hired an artist to make her death statue, um, holding a lotus blossom, as you can see. Originally would have been brightly painted. All of these old statues were originally painted, but the paint was organic in nature, so it uh, decayed and would fall off. And then also at the base is a poem um, addressing the viewer. So it's more than just, hey, here's a statue of some famous ruler. It's, hey, here's a girl who died and her parents wanted a statue made for her, and she's an individual and she's got emotion. It's pretty neat. Okay, so this is a big part of this entire chapter. Um, and if we were closer to the end of the class, I would be like, all right, we're gonna have to do this next time, but we really need to move, and we still got like 30 minutes of class left, so we got to keep this thing going. So Panhellenism versus Polycentricism. Now, Hellenism or Hellenic means Greek or Greek-like. So Panhellenism simply means all Greek, or in this context, it means the Greeks working together, versus being polycentric, which is each polis working on its own. So as the Archaic Age was ending, the Greeks were becoming more alike, but also wanting to remain independent. So due to trade, culture, as we saw with the Oracle and the Olympics, they had a lot more in common than they had keeping them apart. But they were still very proud of what made them different. And of course, they were still rivals. They were proud of, as I said, proud of what made them different. And again, the cultures would often mix. Bards and sages would travel between the cities, spreading stories. The travel that was there, even though it was very difficult because the roads that were there were terrible, and those that did exist were usually full of wolves and bandits and what have you. Was pushed on because of the necessity of trade. And again, most of it was via water. So if these cities were on the coast and had a good port, or multiple ports in the case of Athens and Corinth, they usually were better off. Yeah. Based on their geographic locations, were more economically powerful. They had more arable land, so they could grow more stuff. for ore resources, etc. I'm always checking to make sure you guys don't have any questions for me. Oh, fine. Okay, so this is where the real everything starts. Right. So, there were two invasions, 1490 and 1480 through 1479. For the Persians, it was just a minor issue of expansion. For the Greeks, it was an issue of surviving. Now, Persia was incomprehensibly large compared to Greece at this time. I mean, it'd be like if all we knew was, say, South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, maybe Tennessee, maybe Florida, and the entire Atlantic Ocean attacked us. I mean, it would just be impossibly large to imagine. Um, and we'd all been fighting that entire time, and not just like the states, but every county. Like it was just absurd. Um, the the size difference in Greece and Persia. So the Greeks had to work together. Sparta and Athens ended up becoming the front runner polis in this conflict because they were some of the strongest and ended up being the most influential. Now, it wasn't a clean-cut Greeks versus Persians fight, though, because it never is. There's a lot of events in history where it's like, oh, it's these guys versus these guys, and it never is. The American War for Independence, it wasn't just oh, it's Americans versus the British. It's like no, there were lots of loyalists here that were fighting for the British, and we had a lot of French helping us as well. Um, there was a big fight in. Let me see. There was a big fight in Ireland back in, God, probably the 1200s, against Vikings, but there were Irish and Vikings on both sides. Like, nothing's ever clear cut. So in this case, a lot of polis decided to sit out entirely or work with the Persians because they felt like the Persians were less of a threat than their own neighbors. So, once again, in case you thought I might have been exaggerating, here's Greece. Yeah, there's Naxos. There's Marathon. Athens should be right about here, I think. And there's Persia, and it goes off screen. That's how big the Persian Empire was. I think maybe I overestimated the size of our little thing. Maybe it'd be more like it's South Carolina, was Greece in this example, and all of the counties were all fighting each other, and then the rest of America just decided it was going to beat the crap out of us. Like, and then each county couldn't decide whether they wanted to join in or not. But also, we were split up by water. Like, I don't know how Greece survived this. I mean, the water helped, that's for sure. Uh-uh. Hold on, I need to. Jeez, freaking sass. Okay. So, let's discuss Persia for a moment. It was the biggest, uh, most powerful and aggressive power in the region at the time. Broke away from, conquered the Assyrian Empire, conquered Lydians, Mesopotamians, Babylonians, annexed Syria and Palestine. So, it was just going through and conquering everything. I mean, it basically everything we've talked about up until this point, the Persian Empire had absorbed. So basically, everything in Chapter 1 is now Persia. Conquered all the way to India, conquered Egypt. Excuse me. And then Darius began the first invasion of Greece. Now, again, in Greece, the different city-states were, it was always different. Like, Sparta had kings, sort of. They had two kings. They didn't have a ton of power. Like, they existed more as ambassadors. The real power was like this council of elders or something. I say or something. But there was always some kind of like council or aristocratic group or some level of assembly, some kind of group of people making decisions. In Persia, the king was considered divine, and all of this, excuse me, and all other subjects were. I cannot talk about something about their. Try this again. The king was considered divine. All other subjects were considered slaves. Just like, that's it. And each new part got its own governor, and that because it was so massive, you had to subdivide it. And due to its size, it obviously could field insane armies. The king's personal bodyguard was 10,000 people. We'll discuss numbers here in a moment, but that's absurd. Like, the whole Spartan 300 thing that happened at Thermopylae. That's one of the largest groups of Spartans that they brought together for a battle. Like, That's a lot of Spartans at once. And the king's personal bodyguard of so-called immortals, because they were this elite force of Persian soldiers, was 10,000. Like the numbers here are just absurd. So what started all this? Well, Lydia. Lydia is this region in the Eastern Mediterranean. So it's along the western coast of modern day Turkey. Again, let's just pop back over to. It's here. So again, Greece proper is here, but most of this is not being used by Greece, so it's like this region. And then the Greeks also settled along here, because remember I said this was going to be important later. Now I guess also technically up here, but the main thing is this region here, which, as I said, will be important because Persia's moving along here, and that's where the Greeks are. So, so they were in more contact with the Near East. Cyrus wanted a clear route to the Mediterranean, as you do. And he just figured, hey, we're going to just absorb Lydia because we want to be able to get to the Mediterranean, because why wouldn't you? I mean, you want to get to the sea. And a lot of the Greeks within Lydia were like, hey, this is great. We can work with these guys and like make more money. I mean, this was literally how they saw it. Not, we're being taken over by a foreign power, but hey, we can probably make a lot of money off this guy. That was how they saw it. But this meant that the groups in Lydia and Ionia had now the backing, maybe not directly, but they had some help from Persia, whether Persia knew it or not. And it messed up the power dynamic within Greece, because there was always power dynamics going on within Greece. So a lot of the policies decided to interfere with Persian policies indirectly, messing with the polis who supported Darius. Eventually, the Ionian Greeks revolted with prodding from the outside. Now, I don't know if the book specifically says this, but I'm pretty sure the prodding was Athens. Yeah. Anyway, Athens, we're going to see a lot of that. Athens, like, doesn't get involved directly, but causes trouble, and then everybody else suffers for it. So they managed to throw off the Persians, but they knew the Persians will be back because, well, you all saw that map. And they were like, hey, guys, we threw off the Persians like you said, but they're going to be back. Could you maybe help? And the Greeks never got around to helping. So, yeah, So the Persians came back, and the Ionian Greeks were quickly reincorporated. So once again, here's this map again, because this is a good map. So again, Ionia is right here, and they managed to throw the Persians off for a little bit, but Persia's literally all of this, so you're not going to hold them off for very long without a lot of outside help, so they just came right back. Yeah, not great for them. Now, they didn't have all this up here yet. This land route into Greece comes later. So, obviously, the polis within Greece couldn't decide how they felt about the Persians beating the crap out of the Ionian Greeks. Athens and these other democratic polis wanted to encourage resistance against the Persian tyrants. You know, encourage resistance rather than actually going in and doing anything. Sparta and these other polis in Peloponnnesia, which is the landmass where Sparta is, didn't want to get involved. Now, we'll talk more about that a little bit later. Now, Sparta and Persia had come to blows in the past. But Sparta is... When you think about Sparta, you think about, oh yeah, they're always ready to go to war and always wanting to fight. That's not at all true. They have, bar none, the greatest warriors in ancient Greece. Like, there's no two ways about that. But they also have that like massive population of slaves, and they have to use most of their warriors to keep them from just like overthrowing Sparta. So they're not usually out fighting constantly. Okay, I got you, Terry's. Most policies, though, are more concerned about their own stuff, conflicts between each other. They weren't really worried about what was going on over in Ionia. It's something, well, I mean, as I said, it's something that you see in history over and over again. It's like, oh, this is too far away, it's not important. And then the island polis of Aegina symbolically submitted to Persia, so Athens got Sparta and Corinth to attack them, and then Aegina agreed to an anti-Persian stance. Now, the reason this was important was because Aegina had a really good navy, and if it worked with Persia, it could probably defeat Athens' navy. But the main thing was, oh, Ionia, whatever, that's too far away. Aegina, that's suddenly a problem. What? Get up here. I know it. Now this shows actually both invasions. We'll talk about them in just a minute. Oh, be careful, Tori. Dingus. Okay, so After the event at Aegina, Darius was like, okay, well, that's not cool. Um, we're just gonna go in and take over Greece now. And his advisors were like, hey, well, Greece is fragmented, they're fighting each other, this is gonna be easy. And on paper, I mean, they're not wrong. I mean, realistically, it's this tiny place, they're constantly fighting each other, they can't agree on anything. They're not gonna rally together to fight off an invading force that's like 100 times their size. So you got 25,000 soldiers, which was, tiny for Persia, and sent them to Greece. Only the Athenians were there to fight, which were 10,000 strong at the Battle of Marathon. So 25,000 Persians versus 10,000 Athenians. And the Athenians were only available because I guess they were closest. Now, the Athenians absolutely crushed the Persians at this battle. They lost several hundred men, but killed 6,000 Persians. And I'll discuss why in just a moment. So here's the battle lines. Despite being outnumbered, 2.5 to 1, the Persian troops, were poorly equipped. I mean, they were given a loincloth and a dagger, and were just expected to win in sheer numbers. The Greek center, with the high ground here, you can see the variation on ground level. Pulled them forward, and once they were all committed, had the flanks come in and hit them from the sides. And the thing is, if they're marching in blocks like this, and you hit them from the sides, they really can't react, and it just becomes a killing box, and there's very little they can do about it, especially when you've got them up against a hill like that. All they could do was retreat, really. So let's just discuss the inner war years real quick, and then we'll get to the second Persian invasion next time, because that's a much larger conflict and leads to later events much more directly. So for Persia, the Battle of Marathon was just a battle. I mean, whatever. Okay, we lost a single battle. It was a tiny force. Whatever. For the Greeks, though, it was huge. It's huge source of pride, especially for Athens, obviously, but also caused some issues. Obviously, huge political boost for Athenians. They saw themselves as the saviors for all the Greeks. They used propaganda and warships against policies and even citizens who do not fully support the resistance. So, just because they won the single battle They're like, oh, we're the saviors of Greece, and if you don't support us, you're a traitor. Okay, Athens. Now this wasn't like invented at this point, but it was something that Athens used. Ostracism. It was introduced by Athens to democratically expel dangerous individuals, such as those who supposedly collaborated with the Persians. Basically, they would pick individuals that they felt were dangerous, and they would vote on which one to exile from Athens. And I mean, if you want to talk about votes being rigged, let me tell you, this ostracism thing was very much corrupt from the start. Yeah, hack ballots, groundless accusations, and they just use it to get rid of political rivals. Like, there's a thing on page 55 where it's literally like they found a well full of ballots that somebody had just dumped. Sparta created the Peloponnesian League. Main goal is to get Argos, which is a city near Mycenae, to join them. While that failed, their main concern was still keeping the slave population under control. So they stuck together and kept the Peloponnesian League together, I guess. I wasn't thinking ahead on that one. So yeah, this is an Ostracium. I would find it, but my cat's laying on my book again. Jerk, but I can't move her because she's cute. But yeah, so it's like these broken pieces of pottery that they carved the name in. But the thing is that a lot of the Greeks that were voting were illiterate. So they would have these ballots already marked, and they would choose which one to pick and then put it in the bucket or whatever. But like, what if it wasn't? Anyway, this is the Peloponnesian League there in red. Where is Athens? It's here. Obviously Persia here and like the rest of my room. Now it shows most of the rest of Greece as yellow, which implies that they're with Athens, but that isn't quite true. Not quite the Delian League. We'll get to that next time. So yeah, we'll do that on Thursday, and I will hopefully have an answer for you guys on Thursday as to where we'll be this time next week. If we'll be here, still in my room with my cat sitting in my lap, or actually at the Continuum, which means I'll have to actually get up earlier and put on pants and drive to Lake City. What are you doing? But anyway, sorry. Anyway, I'll catch you folks later on. If you don't have any more questions, I think that'll do it for us for today. Let's set this down here. But yeah, that will do it. Put that down there. There we go. All right. We all good? All right, see you guys on Thursday. Have a good one. Bye for now.